Oh, unspecified error. That's strange. I would prefer that they specify the errors. Um, yeah, so how's your day been? How frenetic has all that has all that stuff been?
How what?
How frenetic has all like the
What does that
rollout?
mean?
Like fast paced and feverish, like crazy fast paced and you know.
Okay. It hasn't been too bad. Um, yeah. I mean, it's been going well.
Yeah. Let's go smooth. What percentage adoption are we at now of version 17?
Oh man, you're gonna make me have these numbers?
Well, do you just know how, like, do you know generics?
Well, I thought we were about 50% already, which was pretty good. Yeah. Dash Ninja's showing almost exactly 50%.
Nice. What does it have to be before it kicks over?
Well, so once it gets to, or I forget if it's 60 or 80%, old master nodes will start getting proof of service banned. But there's also a delay
Mm-hmm.
implemented in that. Um, I think it's like a 2 week delay. Basically, so a right if I update my node today, it won't start reporting other people as being bad until 2 weeks after.
Interesting.
Um, Yeah, and so that's just you know, in case like we massively upgrade super quickly, we don't want to start punishing people too soon,
Mm.
because it's kind of unfair if we release something and then 3 days later their node is being banned. So
Yeah, but several days late, like a week later, he's like, "Come on, get with the program."
yeah, a week is. I mean, I don't know. A week is fine. We don't really want like a super quick rollout, um, just because there could be bugs in version 17 that we haven't found yet. And so it's good to have some people on an old version for a little while, but yeah, give it about 2 or 3 weeks, and we want everyone on the newest version. So
All right. Well, it looks like we have 4 people watching on YouTube, which I consider a crowd. 8 people say they're watching on Odyssey, but I don't know how many are just leftovers. He'll always in live chat saying pasta time. I think it's pasta time. So let me hit this intro and we'll go right into it. So, hey everyone, welcome back to another installment of the same Friday. I have the one and only Pasta with me today. The the man known only as Pasta. How's it going, man?
it's going pretty well.
Yeah,
Can't complain. Yeah.
yeah. So I have to ask you guys to do a audio check because I've had to modify the audio settings a few different times, and for example, last 2 weeks ago, Brian's audio was very insignificant, and so I had to crank up the decibels way up. So if Pasta's too loud, let me know. But also if he's not loud enough, let me know. And live chat wherever you are, whether you're doing the YouTube one or the Odyssey one. I do have a what is it? A non hyper chat, but it's still a chat from Great Wolf saying Prego or Ragu.
Um, it's an interesting question. I think I normally get. I've never gotten ragu. I can say that much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think I'd have to go with Prego. Yeah, I'd go Prego.
Yeah, I've been making a bunch of pasta lately. Was it last night? I did a was a al burro pasta, which is basically like the fettuccine alfredo except without like the heavy cream in there. So that was
Mhm.
good. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I got a I got a little bit of a troll comment from Hilawi saying sound is good for a Dash Core group guest.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know what you could possibly be referring to. If you would be insinuating that some of the people in Dash Core Group, like the CEO, maybe have terrible audio. I
Oh.
don't. I don't. I don't know where you would be getting that information. But
Well, I would personally say that individual in particular has one of the better now source of audio amongst that group, yet the criticism still stands. But we're going to hopefully fix all of this. Eventually it'll all get better. One time's comment and the thing is funny. Anyway, before we just get into too much meta stuff and too much into the comments and all that kind of stuff, yeah, big times. Version core version 0.17 got released. It is in the process of being implemented, as we were chatting about before. First off, how excited are you about that?
Yeah, so it's really good. It's a really valuable release. I mean, just like all of the other releases, there are a lot of great improvements in it, a lot of good backports. Really, there's nothing like super fancy. There's nothing as fancy as implementing chain locks or getting every transaction to be instant send.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of really valuable stuff that is enabling platform to do what it's going to need to do. And we have more of that coming in version 18. But we introduced a new long-living masternode quorum in this version. And so that'll make proof of service more responsive. It'll also obviously support platform being operational as they need their own LLMQ.
Yeah.
There was a lot of thought put into the separation between core and platform to make basically core came at it with the security model that we need to assume that platform is basically running arbitrary code, that they can do whatever they want, and core should still be secure. Platform should not be able to take down core no matter what. And so we've implemented a lot of stuff that limits the scope of RPC commands that platform can run and stuff like that to really ensure that level of security. And then there's also a bunch of network performance improvements that could lead to improvements in instant send performance.
Nice. But
that is yet to be seen. And then the other interesting thing that could be very valuable going into the future is we upgraded our BLS library to the BLS version 1 library. Previously, we were using basically a beta version of the library. And Ethereum is using BLS signatures for different things. And maybe I can go into later what BLS signatures are.
Yeah.
So BLS signatures are signatures that you can aggregate. So just like, ECDSA is a signature algorithm for Bitcoin. Basically, it's the thing that, says, hey, I have this private key and I'm signing this thing. And it's that algorithm that kind of surrounds that process. But BLS is really cool where you can aggregate stuff. So if, say right now, if you send a transaction with 10 inputs, there will be 10 signatures. And each signature is like 90 something bytes, I think. I think 96 bytes, but it could be something different. In BLS, the signature size is a little bit bigger. But you can aggregate them. So my 10 signatures previously would become one signature. And you can even do that on an even bigger scope where, say, Joel's sending a transaction and I'm sending a transaction, each with 10 inputs. All of our 20 inputs would only need one signature. And you can validate with 100% certainty that Joel meant to send the funds that Joel meant to send and I meant to send the funds that I meant to send. But you only need that one signature. And so it really optimizes blockchain space. And so right now, that's not possible on Dash to use BLS as a place for transactions. It's used in our LLMQ network, and it's critically important. If we didn't have BLS, instant send could not be as functional as it is, and chain locks could not be as functional as it is, and as secure as it is.
Because you have to aggregate all these signatures of all these master nodes, and if you just had signature after signature that was like this giant thing, then it would be, it just wouldn't work.
And there are some ways maybe that you could get around that using ECDSA, but it's really complicated and it requires you to use a bunch of network connections that would not be as sustainable, and a bunch of network messages. Whereas with BLS, it really only takes one message that gets passed around a bunch, and it's much more efficient. But anyhow, we upgraded our BLS library to version 1. which is it follows the standard of, I think it's like EIP 2119 or something, that defines the standard of BLS in Ethereum, and that's kind of the standard that almost everyone is coming onto.
Yeah.
In the crypto space, at least. Maybe Zcash is using a different implementation for something. I'm not sure.
So
but
from my memory, just real quick on all this, I remember when I was talking to Codablock way back in the day, Dash developer Alexander Block, who's been less consistent on Dash lately, but still, about basically he said that BLS signatures were not widely used in crypto, and there was no major crypto that used them at the time. Now, first off, like it seems like that has changed if you have like things like Ethereum and Zcash already on it, or if not, then maybe he had a different definition of like being used or whatever. Have you kind of kept up with that?
Well, so I think it's important to note Ethereum is in the early days of adopting BLS signatures. It's not to, and I'm not a Ethereum expert or anything, so I could be wrong on this. Take it with a grain of salt, all of that. But my understanding is that the EIP is just setting the standard for how it can be used in, I believe, Ethereum 2. It is not on mainnet. It's not usable or anything in Ethereum. It's just setting the standard of how it will be used in the future. The only real blockchain that I know of that actively uses it is Chia BLS, which is, Chia Networks, which is where we got the BLS library from. They've been maintaining the library, and we've been assisting a little bit with that maintenance. But yeah, so we upgraded to BLS version 1. And that's really important because now this is a stable standard that really should not be changing going forward. And this could lead to the ability for us to implement BLS signatures securing funds, which could be very valuable on a block storage perspective, as we talked about earlier. That's not officially in the roadmap. It is kind of in the roadmap at this point.
Like the wishful roadmap, not the concrete one, maybe, right?
Yeah, so there's some stuff with platform asset locks, which is basically how you lock some funds up on the layer 1 chain, and they become available on the platform chain to use. It's kind of like an atomic swap, not really, but that can be a decent analogy to think of. And we are considering using BLS to secure those funds. And so it's possible, I don't want to commit to this, but it is kind of in our internal roadmap that there will be rudimentary BLS support for securing funds in version 18.
Yeah.
Could not happen, Don't burn me on a stake for saying this and it not happen, But hopefully that can happen. That almost certainly will not include any kind of like aggregation or anything of that nature. That'll be an additional change that will need to happen. But just kind of a basic implementation of using BLS signatures, which won't be super valuable on a blockchain usage perspective, but will be very valuable for multi-sig, which is the main reason why we want to use it for asset locks. Right now, to do what we want to do, where what we want to do is we want to have these funds basically controlled by a quorum. And so to do that, traditionally, you would need like 100 signatures, which gets really big. That would be a huge transaction.
Of course.
Yeah, but if we do it with BLS, then it becomes incredibly small and incredibly lightweight. It's just one signature. So yeah, that's kind of the funness of this BLS upgrade, is it allows us to secure funds with BLS in the future.
Yeah, now for people who want to hear more about BLS, again, average user, this is probably just way too nerdy and they don't care, but there's a lot of nerds on here. So if you go to medium.com/@CodaBlock, Alexander Block developer has a bunch of good articles there on BLS and what it is and how do they compare with speed and all this kind of stuff. And then that talk about how they're used in long living masternode quorums and stuff like that. So if you want to get into like how all this is like so cool, you can go in there. If you just like your eyes are crossing, maybe not. But I have heard this kind of stuff being compared with Schnorr signatures before. Now, do you understand very well the difference between Schnorr and BLS? I'm sure this has come up on a podcast in the past, but come on, just, no one remembers.
Describing the difference is somewhat difficult for me. I think Codablock talked about it in one of his blog posts. Mm-hmm. My understanding was that there are some improvements that BLS includes that Schnorr does not. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Bitcoin right now is going through their Taproot upgrade, or they're talking about their Taproot upgrade. Mm-hmm. And so they are implementing or planning to implement Schnorr in the future. And there's nothing preventing us from doing that as well. I don't have anything against Schnorr at this point. Yeah, sadly, I can't really talk too much about the differences. I know they're both aggregatable. Oh, I think the big difference was that there are problems when doing threshold signing with Schnorr. I think when it comes to aggregation, they're pretty similar. Yeah. But when it comes to threshold signing, there are big problems with Schnorr, where you have to take really careful precautions, and it becomes a really difficult thing to implement. And if you implement it incorrectly, you could be leaking your private key. Mm-hmm. Whereas sucks. I believe BLS doesn't have those problems to the same degree. And that makes it a lot better for our initial use case, especially of LLMQs, since that is purely threshold signatures.
Yeah. That's that is an interesting. As far as I know, I mean, people are clamoring for Taproot not because it really helps with regular stuff, but because it helps for a lot of the more complicated signature schemes going on with Lightning Network, like opening channels and stuff like that. And so the other thing they're talking about is a privacy improvement, and there's a little bit of a with a lot of nuance right there. But basically, again, I'm glossing over things really quickly. It basically, because they're all the same. Again, adding more parties to the signatures doesn't really make the thing look any different. It's harder to distinguish between different transaction types and things like that. It's harder to draw out very specific data and say, "Ha, this person's doing this. I'm compromising their privacy." Whereas, on the other hand, though, because Bitcoin loves to do this dumb opt-in stuff, where it's like, well, you can have the old kind, and you have the other kind, and you have an even third kind. If not enough people use Schnorr signatures, not enough people do Taproot, then it could actually be worse for privacy than if they hadn't done it at all.
Yeah. Implications of Taproot on privacy is one of those things that I'm not fully convinced on yet. I haven't had the opportunity to really watch a good technical discussion about it or something like that. The benefits that I've seen that are incredibly, incredibly valuable, and Taproot is very valuable from everything that I've seen, is the implementation of what was previously called mast, where basically if you have multiple parts of a and this will get a little technical, so I apologize, but if you have a script that has multiple parts, you can Merkleize that script, and then you can only expose the part that you want to expose. And so you might have a script that has some really kind of crazy conditions, and maybe one of your conditions is if Joel and I sign for it, then it's okay. But that might be your last case condition. But it might be that you don't even want Joel to know that he's a part of this.
Yeah.
And with normal Bitcoin scripts, once you use that script, once you spend from it, Joel would be able to tell that he is a part of this. But with Mast and with Taproot implementing a version of Mast, Joel would only learn that he can be a part of it if we actually use that path. But if I'm just using one of the other paths of the script, he never learns that he has the option to, sign for anything.
Yeah. So just all scripting kinds of improvements and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Now,
pretty much.
now, like, just I guess to get that out of the way, if you had to do something like this, wouldn't you? My thought was, wouldn't you just make the whole network do this instead of implement it as like an opt-in kind of a thing?
Well, I mean, it does become difficult because backwards compatibility is really important.
Yeah.
If there comes a date and like all of the Bitcoin wallets produced so far stop working, that's kind of pretty problematic. And so you have to strike some level of balance, where I think Bitcoin is relatively too conservative on their modification approach, in their approach to any kind of modification. But I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah. And that
However,
yeah, keep
I
going.
think they're improving recently because they are doing stuff like Taproot, which, kind of surprises me. I wouldn't have necessarily expected it, but yeah.
Yeah, they probably realized at some point that Lightning specifically, but other stuff too maybe, but especially Lightning is an absolute dead end if they don't fix some of these things. And I had a interview with Max Hillbrand a few months ago where he goes into some of the details and some of the things. I don't remember exactly what they're waiting on Taproot to do with Lightning, but it could be there was something that they're waiting for that would enable like channel factories where you could like onboard a whole bunch of people onto Lightning all at once, and where they can't do it right now. And that could have been a Taproot thing. It could have been another thing. But yeah, again, it's pretty complicated stuff. But so while we're on the subject of Bitcoin and its conservative approach and stuff like that, that's a good time to go into the backports. So, yeah, backports. There's been a lot of backports in this release. What kinds of things were backported, real quick, that you remember? Off the top of your head. It doesn't have to be super detailed.
Yeah, it is a big, big list. The vast majority of it is just refactoring the code base, optimizing the code base, making stuff more efficient, changing the way that benchmarks work, that kind of stuff. There was some low-level code that implemented support for Betch32 addresses.
Yeah.
As of this point, we're not supporting Betch32 addresses, but I mean, I don't really have anything against them. They're generally they're longer, but they have better error correction and error checking features, which can be incredibly valuable. And they're also less ambiguous because their character set is smaller. So that might be something that we will want to look at, and maybe we'll want to use BLS. We might want to use Betch32 if we introduce an address type for, say, BLS.
Yeah.
However, there wasn't anything that sticks out to me as being super interesting that people would be very interested in. There's just a lot of low-level refactoring and changes that are important but aren't like super interested. Although there are a couple of things there. It's a lot easier now to upgrade your wallet to a HD wallet. That's a new change that was implemented via Bitcoin backports. There were you can now load and unload wallets at runtime, which can be very valuable depending on your use case. Let's see, what else might have been interesting. There's nothing else I can think of at the moment.
Yeah, well, this is a good sort of segue into, we got a question on the last stream, the non-dash one, that from our good buddy Great Wolf here, who also asks some questions in Discord we'll get to in a little bit, but he says, I don't really understand all the store of value narrative regarding Bitcoin. As long as crypto shares the same deflationary monetary policy as Bitcoin, over time, why would they not eventually eat into Bitcoin's market share long term? So let me just hit my thing, and I'll let you jump in on this if you think you have some good points too. First off, I do think that that is true, that apples to apples, long term especially, long term, you will see other projects that do technically more things than Bitcoin start to take a larger market share. And I've kind of started to, like, over time, had to, like, wrap my head around this whole concept of why does a technologically inferior project still have a much higher valuation in a lot of cases. And the thing is, what I hate to say it, but, like, the market is always right. It's not necessarily, like, morally right. It's not necessarily, like, factually correct about certain things, but it's basically when you see money flowing into something, rather than say, oh, that's wrong or it's stupid, there's a reason for it, and you should seek to understand that. And so that's what I did. I sought to understand the way valuations are today. And so, for example, we'll possibly just talk about backports. A big part of Dash's new upgrade is backporting to the Bitcoin code base. So there's value in having the Bitcoin code base out there right now, so you can take elements to it as, like, the most, I'm not sure if it's the most worked over and complete kind of code base, but it's one of the major ones that a lot of coins are based off of. There's value in having that no one, backports. No one does the other way around. Bitcoin doesn't backport from anyone as far as I know. I'm sure it takes inspiration in certain areas, but there's value to having that. And then also, we're talking about the slow to change, conservative to change, because every time you change too much, you have backwards compatibility issues and breaking changes. And if people have some old rusty software that's run an old school version of Bitcoin and they have money behind it, and their money won't work unless they upgrade something, and they can't figure out how, like, that decreases that utility on that front. So of course it's like a big old balancing game. I do expect over time, as Bitcoin has to evolve more, it'll become, more on even keel with other things. I do think that over time you will have projects that have more, like, transactional utility and finer points of technology start to eat into its market share. But that kind of explains why there's that store of value. There's a lot of things that give Bitcoin value today are things it didn't do or it doesn't do, ironically. And it's not like, well, the market's stupid, it's irrational. Maybe, but there's also some actual real world value to those things today. At least that's the way I've started to observe this. I don't know if you concur on that, Pasta, or if you have other things to add.
No, I don't really have too many thoughts about that. I don't know. I try not to speculate too much on why the market does what it does or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I just keep my head down and keep working on cool tech, and that's my priority.
Yeah, there should be more people doing that kind of stuff. What was it? I had one time shared something about thoughts on Elon Musk tweeted he thinks that the Lightning Network is necessary for now. Well, the way Bitcoin works today, yeah, I don't see how it is with, like, on-chain scaling the way it is. But, it's another approach to scaling, and kind of like what Dash is doing, to be honest. But let me check out the... Oh, yeah, before we go into, like, some more of these questions and stuff, opcodes. So, can you talk a little bit about the opcodes that were introduced?
Yeah, so that is a change that in a lot of ways I'm really excited about, primarily because that was a completely community pushed for thing. Dash Core did not spend any time implementing the code. We spent time reviewing the code, but we did not spend any time reviewing it. I mean, we didn't spend any time implementing it.
Yeah. You did a review shit. It could just be broken. Who knows? Yeah.
We spent time working with the people behind it a little bit, getting working on the dip, learning their inspiration, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that really, really excites me that this was completely community done. And I really like that, and I want more of that. If you want to see something happen in Dash,
Make it happen.
make it happen. We will support you. I mean, there are bounties out there that probably you could claim
Mm-hmm.
to do stuff, and we want more people contributing. I've said this every time I've been on the podcast, I think, but we want as many people contributing as possible. So yeah, Dip 20 implemented a number of new opcodes. Well, not necessarily new. A number of them had been disabled early on in Bitcoin's history, and a number of them a number of them had been implemented by Bitcoin Cash. And knowing the history here is maybe a little bit valuable. Early on in Bitcoin's history, there were some problems with scripts. There was I forget the exact thing, but there was something like a opcat opdupe that if you sent that script to a node, it would try and evaluate that script and it would just crash it because it got into an infinite loop. And so early on, they basically decided, instead of fixing these, we're just going to disable them. And they were they cast a very wide net in what they disabled. And so as time has passed and crypto has evolved, we've really kind of realized that a lot of these opcodes can be incredibly valuable, and they're not that dangerous. You just have to be a little careful. But at this point, these opcodes have been implemented on mainnets for at least years on Bitcoin Cash and have been fully operational. And so there's no real risk here, and it adds a bunch of utility. So yeah, I'm really excited about these, and I think they can do a lot of good. So
Yeah, and it was one of those things where one of the major reasons for some of these opcodes that was cited was tokens, and everyone loves tokens. And I think the token boom came and went. However, there's still value behind having certain tokens and things like that. And the entire idea of, I believe there were some ideas that, when Dash platform's out, and then we'll have a much better framework for doing this kind of thing. So we don't need to worry about those opcodes right now. Seemed to be that sort of an attitude. I don't know if that was specifically held by some people like that. But anyway, it seems like the idea is like, well, short term, we need some more things like that can enable tokens, because otherwise I'm going to have to do it on another chain. So that kind of got implemented, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm happy to see it. I think there was also some stuff with like smart card stuff where you basically have a wallet embedded within like a credit card.
Yeah.
I think there was some inspiration there as to why they needed these opcodes. So
Yeah,
I'm hoping for some cool stuff.
Yeah, there's lots of cool stuff that's enabled by all that kind of stuff. And the last sort of 0.17 before we hit some of these questions, the last one of those that I remember was the renaming of private send to CoinJoin and scooting that tab to the very back. So, I mean, we discussed this thing before, but it is just an advanced version of CoinJoin that uses the Dash Master network, and it just has been called, dark send to private send or whatever it's been called over the years, and then the P word tends to be a dirty one these days, and so it got just unbranded to just CoinJoin sort of. And so
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I'd rather give it some even more generic name that's just like mixing or something like that. I'd rather do that, but it is what it is. The thing I do have a beef with is the tab is all the way at the other end there, where it's like annoying to reach, which is just a minor UX thing. Is there a reason why that got moved all the way over there? Do you know?
Well, so I think we decided that previously, we had send and we had private send, and so it made sense to put private send next to send. Now that it wasn't called private send, it really I don't know, it kind of didn't fit there because I think you would send and then you would coin join and then you had receive, and it just felt a little weird. Um, in the future, we would like to kind of streamline the UX and get
Mm-hmm.
basically everything CoinJoin related onto that tab. Um, but it just, I think it probably makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have a strong opinion on it. I was
Mm-hmm.
fine with it in its current position, but I'm fine with it in the new position as well. So
Do you think
yeah.
anything behind the new position had to do with putting at the end to downplay it for like the political reasons, or is that just FUD?
No, I don't think so. I think that's just where it made sense. I don't think there was any political reason behind it. I think Dustin Face made that change, and I don't think there was any motivation outside of it didn't really make sense between send and receive anymore. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, that sort of wraps up the basic kind of overview of the upgrade. Now, I did get anonymous did ask this question. Let me actually expand it out because it's an actual CoinTree one. Can Pasta elaborate further on why he had an issue with the statement in DCI Assume Dash Central that core devs take their ideas, get it approved by DCG management, and then get it included in the roadmap? I'm sure you know the context of this because I do not.
yeah, so I think it's really important that DCG is not a one man show. Um,
Mm-hmm.
DCG is not Ryan. As great as Ryan is, and he and I have great conversations, and he gives a lot of valuable input. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't change what I do strictly based on what Ryan says.
Yeah.
If he wants to fire me, fine. I don't care. Whatever. I don't. I'm not too worried about that. But whatever. When it comes down to it, every team within Dash Core does to a large degree and should own their own roadmap.
Mm.
Um, Long term, I want to get to a point where these are separate teams. Early on in Dash and the DAO, it was imagined, oh, we're going to have all of these different development teams, and they're going to work together, but they're going to be distinct, and we want this to be as decentralized as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Having everything be up to Ryan is like, oh, Ryan, should we implement this new BLS library?
Mm-hmm.
And like that doesn't make sense.
Of
That
course.
shouldn't be how it is. And because of that, we own our own roadmap. So
Mm-hmm.
if Eugene and Dustin Face and I decide to put something in, that's what happens. Even Bob gives great input, but Bob doesn't control what we do. And that's how it should be in a decentralized structure. Dash is a decentralized cryptocurrency, and I don't think we want it being all up to one person. That doesn't make sense for a decentralized cryptocurrency.
Yeah. Which is kind of an interesting it's kind of an interesting structure because we have ideas in this world, right? We have things of what we want to accomplish, and then we build things around them to try to make those things a reality. And so, obviously, Dash Core Group is, I wouldn't, again, obviously being a little, simplistic for the sake of the conversation, but it's like sort of like a centralized corporate entity, except it's building open source software, dealing with open source developers, and more importantly, it's owned and controlled and funded exclusively by a completely decentralized, masterless, ownerless, memberless, I guess, network, a decentralized autonomous organization. And so there's like a bunch of different farces and structures all in place. And so just thinking of it like, you have to have some sort of a company to deal with some kinds of structural things. But to expect Dashcore Group to work like Microsoft, for example, it's just like it's not going to work that way. It works in a completely different way than that. And yeah, it's kind of exciting to see how the structures start shaking out.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is an important topic. Like when the block reward reallocation was initially being discussed, Eugene was against it. I was kind of neutral. I didn't really care either way. I thought the network would be fine either way. But Ryan was really heavily in favor of his direction.
Yeah.
And so in a normal corporate, environment, you would be like, okay, well, CEO says we do X, so we do X. But that's not how it works in Dash. Ryan wanted this thing done. And so he spent the effort talking with the community and talking with the developers and convincing us that it would be okay and convincing the community that it would be okay. And then we had a vote on it in the community. The only reason why it got implemented is because that vote passed.
Yeah, of course.
If that vote didn't pass, it doesn't matter what Ryan says. We're not going to implement that change. Our governance structure in Dash is the ultimate authority. That's what that is what it comes down to. Obviously, the governance structure can't force Eugene to code something, but we really defer to it. Even if I still don't think Eugene really liked the block reallocation at the time, but he saw that the network approved it, and that wasn't a breaking thing for him, and so he was the one that implemented it. He wrote, I think, 90% of the code for the block reward reallocation, even though he didn't like it, because the network said this is the direction we want to go. And that's the way that our governance should be. It shouldn't be up to Ryan or Bob. As much as I love Ryan or Bob, and I want to make that clear because they're great people to work with.
Yeah. Do you know what Eugene thinks about it today? Has he shifted? Have you heard of a shift, or is he just like, don't care what I think, it's implemented?
I don't know how much he cares. I think he's fine with it. He hasn't really talked about it. I don't think he loves it, but I don't think I definitely don't. I think he's more positive than he is negative.
Well, that's
I'll
good.
put it that way.
So that, of course, that reminds me, like, governance is governance, right? And the block size limit was raised, years after the initial decision to raise it came through when Evan put in the proposal. Should we should we increase the block size? Should the time come for it? And this was unanimously yes. It was just decided. People who like off-chain scaling and stuff, as opposed to that, look elsewhere. Now, there's some other governance proposals I didn't like necessarily as much. So the logo change was something I'm glad it turned out the way it did. Not every governance proposal did I like the way it turned. That I personally, or even Ryan, liked the way things turned out. Like the incentive realignment for the DAO, where unused treasury funds would be sent to miners or masternodes, and there was a big debate over which specific form of that should be implemented. And Ryan's vision of those two, or rather the one where it's split to miners and masters, ended up winning out. But then when that got taken to the network didn't like it, or whatever it was, it didn't pass. And I'm really bummed I'm salty about that to this day. I really think it should have been implemented. Rumor has it that there might be a little bit more, there might be another go of it at some point in the future, in which case, hopefully, I really hope the community passes it. I really hope that the message gets across and all that. If it doesn't, what can you do, though? You can't just say, well, yeah, we're going to ram this one through. It's just going to work this time. It's like, not really.
Yeah. So, yeah, Dash is not like Microsoft. Dash's structure is very different, and the way that we approach decision making is different, and that's a good thing. So,
yeah. Now, we do have a question in Discord from Great Wolf. Great Wolf's watching right now. So, can BIP 143 be added to the roadmap as it's implemented in Bitcoin Cash? And then he did an explanation in the general channel, whatever. I don't know. He tagged you and stuff. I'm not sure if you managed to actually see that. I didn't quite get it, but I didn't pay super close attention to what it said because it was a little technical and I have to kind of go through. But yeah, I'm sure you looked into it, right?
Yeah, I did actually. So I looked into this, and I actually talked with Eugene about this and kind of got his input as well. Hopefully he doesn't kill me for talking about his input publicly. But anyhow, basically, as implemented in Bitcoin Cash, we wouldn't do, because the main idea behind what Bitcoin Cash was doing was replay protection, basically preventing transactions from being broadcast on Bitcoin and on Bitcoin Cash,
Mm.
which was problematic for Bitcoin Cash for quite a while.
Yeah, for
Um,
for obvious reasons, you know.
yeah. And so obviously in Dash, that's not important whatsoever. We don't that doesn't do anything for us.
Hmm.
However, the key thing that I forget who brought this up, but thank you for bringing it up because it made me look into it,
Hmm.
and it was valuable to look into it. The main thing that he was looking at was the signing of the amount.
Mm.
Um, so in your signature signing, you actually sign the value of that input, I believe. And that's really important because currently hardware wallets, if they sign a transaction to validate that the amounts are correct and there's nothing like funky going on and a miner's not like doing weird stuff, um, they have to check the amount of the input. And the way that they do that is by having the software pass in the previous transaction. And then they like hash the transaction and then they get the amount from that transaction and everything like that. And it's really computationally expensive, especially on these very small embedded systems that don't have many resources.
Hmm.
And so the change specifically outlined is uh, it enables you to not have to pass in those transactions, those previous transactions, and you sign the amount. And since you're signing the amount, there's no funky business that can happen there. Um, and it leads to really valuable optimizations for hardware wallets and other very
Mm.
constrained systems. Um, and so, yeah, I talked with Eugene, and we both are supportive of this from a kind of technical level. We both like this idea. Um, the only it fitting it into our backport into our backlog is a little difficult. So if there's someone out there that's interested in this, I would highly suggest that you create a dip. It would probably be a very short dip, and create the modification. And we would support you in that, and we would help you in that.
Hmm.
Um, if it doesn't get done by the community, we might end up finding time in this release cycle, but it's difficult. We have a lot of stuff on our plate this release. So
Yeah.
I would really like for someone to take it on, but
And so, how much can it just be implemented straight away, or is there some? I mean, obviously, because it's a different, you can't just copy paste. It isn't Litecoin, right? Uh, Obviously, you can't just do it straight like that. But are there some? Is it going to be a more difficult, like significantly more difficult than just implementing in a straight up Bitcoin fork, and or anyway?
yeah, it should be pretty easy.
Hmm.
Because Bitcoin Cash implemented this, there is a version that there is a pull request. I
Hmm.
Yeah, it should be a pull request that they use, or maybe it's a merge request or whatever
Yeah.
they call the
GitHub
stuff.
semantics.
Yeah, whatever. I don't think they use GitHub. They use some other system. I don't know it's not GitLab or anything. It's some system they
It's
host. But anyhow, um,
git.cash.
if you find their basically pull request where they implement it, there would just be some trivial modifications to remove the fork logic, the relay protection logic, as well as adding a hard fork in Dash's code base, which is pretty easy to do. Um, it really wouldn't be that difficult, but it would just take a little bit of time. But it wouldn't be too hard, and there is code that you can look at. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So, what is the actual process for? Um, what is the actual process that someone would take? Let's say there's an intrepid developer right now that says, "Oh yeah, I like to do this," you know, and so what you write up a dip, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you write up a dip, a dash improvement proposal, and then you write up some code with it, I guess, on GitHub, and then yeah, you get it done. And there's bounties for this, aren't there?
Yeah, there are.
So is it
Um,
is it a specific bounty like like something in the incubator or whatever that's like a, oh, Dash Core, blah, blah, blah thing bounty, or, claim for this much Dash? Or is it, would you like create it from scratch?
Yeah, so this could be a specific bounty. If someone's interested in this topic, feel free to reach out to me and we can arrange a specific bounty and a specific amount for both creating the dip and for the actual implementation. Both of those would be able to have a bounty associated with them. Or it could fall under the kind of catch-all bounty that we have for Dash Core for implementations, for any improvement to Dash Core. Either way, there would be bounties associated with it. Yes.
Yes. So in the Odysee live chat, Ujinim6 says block reward is kind of okay-ish. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. Hi everyone, by the way. So yeah, Ujin is watching on the correct platform. I'm sure YouTube's fine too, but that's the good one.
Well, I'm glad I represented his opinion accurately.
Yeah, or at least he hasn't yelled at you yet. So the person asked that one, of course, is Great Wolf. Now, Great Wolf, do you have any development experience, and could you do this yourself? Because if you could, or if you know someone who did it, or you want to get one of the Bitcoin Cash people to just, I wouldn't say copy paste, but like replicate a lot of the work just for Dash, there could be money behind it. So anyway, that's just a good little shout out to that. And by the way, on this very channel, I have a how-to video for the Dash incubator, how to use it, how to go through the process step by step of using it. And so if you want to get involved in just doing all kinds of stuff, that's like covers like from the ground up, starting an idea, concept, and then just taking it to its completion. But you can just jump in and just look at what needs to be done, and just you get paid Dash. It's great. So that's just a little suggestion thing there. Let me see what else we got here now. And of course, anyone can ask Pasta a question. The odds of it being answered go way up if you use a super chat like was just done with the CoinTree thing we did before, or a hyper chat on Odysee. Here's the hierarchy first. I'm going to get to the rest of these Discord questions, and then there's like one or so more. And then we get the CoinTree super chat next. And then we go Odysee hyper chat next. And then we go Odysee regular chat next. And at the very bottom is the YouTube comment section. Sorry, but the YouTube comment section is a little sketch anyway. So, we got how's the multi-party payout task going? Is there good progress?
Yeah, not really. No one's really came along and taken that. I think I saw earlier when I was on Trello that someone had there had been some conversations there. I think Ash Francis had been talking with someone there. So there might be some stuff that I'm not fully up to date with, but my understanding is there's not really been much progress there, sadly.
Oh, it's unfortunate. Well, it is what it is. I really hope that gets done, because for those who aren't familiar with it, multi-party paths right now, in the beginning, masternodes just paid out to a single address. And then at some point, I forget when deterministic masternodes and all that kind of stuff was implemented, there are now two addresses. You could pay out to your node operator and yourself running the masternode, just like split it off right away. And so what we're looking for is the ability to do a multi-party payout, which means that you can just pay to, like, let's say 12 people or something like that, which would make it easier to implement a relatively trustless masternode shares system, where now you can just kind of throw in, you can just pool together a bunch of people who are, all the poorers can get together and collectively create a masternode. And right now, though, you can do it. It's a little clunky depending on how you do it. CrowdNode might be working on something cool for that, but it's a little clunky. But the part you can't really do trustlessly, like you can have it so that anyone can split up the node and get the refund transaction, so you don't risk any funds. But someone has to get all the payouts, which is the reason you start this to begin with, and then they have to manually send it out. So multi-party payouts would be a huge part of that. So if you want to jump in the Dash incubator and start looking around, or just message any of us anywhere, and just start asking around how how you can do that. I would really appreciate if you guys got on that. There's like a few bounties that I'm like really like, we gotta do this thing. That's what, like, the multi-party payout thing is one big one. The other one is the Thorchain integration, which I just interviewed the dude about that earlier before the podcast today. That was really cool. So those are the two big ones that I'm kind of like waiting for, other than, when Evo, right? When platform. So that's kind of my perspective on that. Here we go. What are Pasta's thoughts on the new Protocol Developer Incentives Fund? Does he foresee this as being beneficial for retention and attractive to new devs long term, or is more needed? Well, let me explain two things before we get into Pasta's take on that. First off, there is a proposal by Andy Freer up right now that basically creates like a war chest of sorts to pay the Dash developers an extra bonus on top of all this stuff in order to retain them long term, because basically a lot of people have been working for the love of it in Dash, and they are considered by some people, apparently by Andy, to be underpaid compared to the industry, and wants to make sure that they're paid a lot of money so that they are actually retained and don't float off to other projects that pay more money. The other thing I'd like to point out is probably Pasta would directly benefit from said proposal, so take whatever he says with that grain of salt in mind. But with that in mind, what do you think?
So whether or not this, so obviously, first off, yes, I'm massively biased, and so go vote yes for this proposal. But the idea, I think, is incredibly valuable to the DAO and Dash. Right now, we are just paying developers hourly, which is fine in a lot of ways, but it means that if someone else comes along and says, hey, we want to pay you more, that there are no golden handcuffs around.
Yeah.
A lot of companies have a structure where they have a kind of retention fund where you get shares and they vest over a period of time. And then once your vesting period is up, you can either sell those shares or keep onto them. But if you leave the company during that vesting period, you get nothing. You don't get those shares. And so that's really what this is kind of focusing on, is it's trying to extend the current compensation structure to have a long-term perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly important, to really have a structure where the developers kind of, they lose value if they leave Dash. Yeah. I mean, blockchain is incredibly developer. It's a really expensive place.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're going through hiring processes right now to get more people, but some of we would like to be able to compete on the front of, hey, if you come and stay here for a while, you will get vested Dash based on your level of contributions, because that's just not something that we can offer right now. And so, yeah, I think it'd be really valuable if this proposal isn't it. There might be a solution in the future, but obviously I'm hoping that the community likes this. And so far on voting, I think it's been broadly positive. So I'm hoping this passes, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a huge thing. The entire benefit of the DAO is that you get to pay developers. You get to pay developers, right? And so having them on the cheap is like a bear market mentality, I guess. Like you got to pay them whatever you can get away with, whatever you got, run a lean, tight ship, all this kind of stuff. But I feel like there's two big changes. First off, or several. First off, the price of crypto, I mean, obviously this week excluded, has been doing way better. More important, I mean, even at its more recent lows, I do believe that Dash is like over double sustainability or something like that, which, I'm sure I'll have Glenn on the podcast at some point to talk a little bit more about that, the specifics of that. But first off, there's more money for this stuff. Second, DCG, Discord group that pays the developers with network funds, obviously, has been building war chests. And basically, they were not in a position to be able to do that last year, or last cycle rather, for legal reasons. And now that they've managed to be able to figure this out, now it looks like there will be more sustainability for the next bear market. There won't be the same lean times. And also, platform's almost out, which could be something really cool. And also, there's been a shift, thanks to the incubator, but a shift to much more collaborative community type development in Dash. And it's funny because there were like the Dash devs that DCG hired, and that was it, kind of, for a while. And then there's wonderful people like Pasta that just come along and do cool stuff, and then ended up getting a job and stuff. And those, like the Pastas of the world, were very rare back in the day, and I think they're becoming much more common with the incubator, and more people, for example, working on this opcodes dip and stuff like that, and then now hopefully working on this BIP 143 or whatever it was dip, and then all that stuff. So yeah, I really think that, what is that, as the old Microsoft saying is, developers, 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 to do an old throwback. Ooh, we got a new hyper chat. Let me refresh it on the actual OBS screen here. Okay, someone, just so you can see it pop out. Here we go. Hey, Joel and Pasta. What are your thoughts on the new proposal for having additional funds available to reward and keep their best developers? Does DCG support it? One time. Thank you for asking a question I just answered one time. I know there was a little bit of delay. I heard that there was a delay in CoinJoin and stuff like that. But yes, we did answer your question. The reason it was answered is because it was asked independently in Discord and stuff.
And so just to answer the very end of that question of does DCG support it, I'm not speaking for DCG, but I will say that this proposal was created basically by the trust protectors. They are heavily involved, and they are the basically overseers of it. And from my conversations internally, I have not talked with anyone at DCG who has been against this proposal. So take that with, I can't really, I shouldn't really say who I've talked to, but I haven't come across anyone who has been against it. So take that with what you may.
Yeah, take it with a grain of Parmesan, which will have to be the new thing. So the last in the DCG questions bit on here in Discord, which is pretty generic from Ash. What is Pasta's vision, or what is his, but I'm assuming that means you. What's your vision for where Dash should be by the end of 2022? Now, there's a lot of places that could be, right? As far as like, what is it price-wise? What is it daily transaction network usage-wise? What is it business development adoption-wise? What is it technology, like protocol development-wise? What is it DApp development-wise? There's a bunch of different ways, but I'll just let you interpret it however you would like to answer the question and just answer it. So what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting question. Generally, I try to keep my thinking really towards the next release or the next two releases. So towards the next year, which I guess this is about what that is at this point. It's about a year and a half. So obviously platform will be out. And so I hope that is getting substantial usage and being very valuable. Hopefully there will be desktop wallets that support Dash Pay at this point and support usernames and all of that.
Yeah.
I hope that there will be continued improvements to the scaling of instant send. I think there's a good amount of stuff that can be done there, but it's not easy and takes a lot of time and a lot of thinking. So I hope that in the next year and a half we'll be able to make some further improvements on instant send. I would like to introduce probably a variable block size. I think right now, probably a variable block size with a certain minimum. I kind of like the block 75 approach, which was a BIP in the Bitcoin scaling debate, which basically said, let the maximum block size be like not exactly, maybe one and a third times the average block usage over the last amount. And I think that's valuable to limit how fast stuff can grow, such that you're not super vulnerable to spam attacks or like poison block attacks or anything like that. But you are able to scale without necessarily having protocol intervention. I think that's one of the problems that we have right now is if Dash really took off, we would have to release a new version and a new hard fork to increase the block size, which isn't preferable. I would like to see a level of automatic instant send handling where maybe instant send has a dynamic fee such that if the network is unable to produce instant sends fast enough, it will start only creating instant sends if the fee is high enough, in creating a fee market around instant send, which should make attacks on instant send and chain locks much more expensive.
Yeah. Now, the little question on that bit is, from what I've heard, it should be scaling instant send should be easier than scaling transactions as a whole. Now, of course, this is some stuff that Darren talked to me about. I'm sure, there's different levels of nuance to this whole thing. But what are the situations where you'd want to actually limit instant send beyond what transactions are actually out there?
Well, so right now on the network, the throughput limitation is not block propagation. It is instant send, or at least it was previously when we've done stress tests. Maybe there's value to do another one at some point. Although, please, if you're thinking of doing something, please coordinate with me so that I can at least do some monitoring and get some good data out of it. Don't just randomly do stuff.
And let's complete the version 0.17 upgrade first, maybe, before screwing everything up.
Yeah. So right now the bottleneck is instant send. And so finding ways to scale that more is incredibly valuable. But if there does become if there is like a throughput maximum with our current architecture, we really should look to ways to mitigate the downtime and mitigate the problems that happen when instant send is non-functional. And part of that would be creating a fee market around it. So
yeah, I mean, I really like the idea economically, the scaling economics, right, of a fee market. I don't like the way the reality is played out on, for example, Bitcoin and Ethereum. So obviously, wherever there's scarcity of a valuable asset, that affects prices. And if you don't let it affect prices, you have all kinds of other bad unintended consequences. The problem with the fee markets of, for example, Bitcoin is, so I've actually sent more Bitcoin transactions this year than I have in like the past several years combined, because I've been trying to run this stupid goddamn Lightning node. Still don't have it working, but hopefully close. Fingers crossed. But I found like the actual fees to send a Bitcoin transaction are high but not insane. Like you can get away with like a 50-cent transaction if you're lucky. Now, if you want it like confirmed within that day, it's going to start to cost you, especially within the hour. That's where the price goes astronomically higher. And so because of like that scarcity, and Ethereum is even worse, I think, because the intervals are so much closer, and a lot of this stuff has to do with like with the ICO things, people are trying to get in like really quickly, and then of course the fees would spike. So automatically with Dash, things are going to be different because if you have an instant send transaction and it's chained instant send, you should be able to zip, zap, zap, zap back and forth. It all works. Who cares if you don't get a confirmation all day, pretty much, as far as I'm able to understand. And so, therefore, like, there's no reason in high congestion times to pay more for a transaction unless you want it on an exchange where they need chain locks for whatever reason. They need one confirmation, and therefore you want to have it like a little bit higher so it gets in there faster. Or unless the network is just so completely overloaded that, again, as you said, you'd have to have a minimum fee, like a little bit of a fee market to make sure you're in that instant send zone. And then after that, deeper into the instant send zone doesn't really matter. So that's just some kind of rambling on that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It'll be valuable to work to kind of align incentives there and make sure that when instant send is capped out, that there is an incentive to not be using, or yeah, just you know what I'm getting at. It's valuable to align incentives, and that's something that I want us to make progress on. So
Yeah, generally speaking, like surge pricing in Uber and stuff is very valuable as much as it sucks if you're caught into it. But I don't like surge pricing for coffee. I want to go and spend $2, $3, $4 on a coffee and then that's it. I don't want when it's a busy day. Oh, it's busy today. The coffee is going to be $8.50 because there's a lot of customers. Like that kind of stuff sucks. That takes away the utility from it. And of course, like I'd rather have enough abundance so there's not that scarcity. So you have to do it. Now, of course, if you're like, like let's say I spend $15 on a bag of coffee beans. Now, what happens if there's rationing and like almost like I'd probably be willing to pay several times that if I need to because I'm a big coffee person. But I don't. That's not an ideal situation. So yeah, that would hopefully not be that. So on the let me just see who else has said stuff. On the YouTube live chat, psychotic with the number of stuff. Yeah, I know that guy. Says, is there some kind of chart / collection of data on previous network tests, stress tests? So before you answer, Paz, I'll just answer. Yeah, it's on the blockchain. Just a stupid throwaway. You look at the blockchain. Okay, whatever. Now that I've said that stupid thing, do you have any take on that?
I had a fun spreadsheet where I collected some decent data. Maybe reach out to me and I can try and see if I can find it and give it to you and see what the data. Oh, I might have just found it here. I don't remember if this was on mainnet or testnet. What it looks like is that I saw. So I was spamming transactions with a maximum average throughput of 210 transactions per second. And I saw a maximum average instant send lock throughput of 18 per second. The non-average peaks were a little bit higher than that on both values, but the average over I think 1,000 like data point collections was an average of 17.7 instant send locks per second. I think this was on version 16, and I don't remember if it was on mainnet or testnet, but whatever that means to you.
Yeah, so it's like 1.5 million instant sends per day, kind of.
Yeah, something like that.
And
So
so,
yeah,
yeah, so you want a hell of a lot higher than that for, you know, for mass adoption and stuff.
yeah, and there are some simple things to do. One of the things that might happen in version 18 is increasing the number of active instant send quorums
Mm-hmm.
from 24 up to something like 96. Um, there would potentially need to be some changes in how we calculate what mass nodes are in a quorum in order to be able to do that successfully. But
Yeah.
increasing the number of instance end quorums could, in theory, increase throughput by a factor of probably a factor of 4.
Mm.
So that could be very valuable to do, but we'll see.
Yeah. So, Great Wolf mentioned something in the live chat, and I think it's on a significant delay on Odysee, which, what you gonna do? But he says, is it some? He talk about the adaptive block size. He says, is it something similar to what Monero does? And so, first off, I'll just let you answer that thing because I have some input.
Yeah, so I think it is similar, um, but I don't know to what degree. Where I derived it from was the Block 75 proposal in Bitcoin. I don't know the specifics of how Monero handles it. I don't know um,
Mm-hmm.
kind of what their percentages are and just what their timeline is and all of that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
it is the same basic idea.
I don't remember 100%. I do, however, remember that there were some issues with the adaptive block size to where, and as you mentioned a minimum plus adaptive block size. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's a lot. Like, for example, let's just say we go up to 10 megabytes in the next release or whatever. 10 meg, it'd be like a 10 megabytes plus. And so that makes a lot more sense because I believe that the way the transaction volumes were occurring with Monero, there were some spam attacks. I believe I can't remember exactly. I think there was, and again, this is not only did I not remember, this is also years old, so they might have fixed some of these things. But I know that some of the pitfalls might be the adaptive block size goes down to whatever it is. Like let's just say like a you know, 50 kilobyte blocks or whatever for the transaction volume of the moment. And then you have like a big surge in transactions, and then all of a sudden all the blocks are like completely full because that's as big as they're getting. And then by the time it adapts to get bigger, then the transactions fall off and it's no longer. So there's like disruptions that can happen if you wait for that. Kind of like with the whole difficulty adjustment with you know inferior coins that don't adjust every block, right? Because you have like 2016 blocks, I believe, in Bitcoin, and just every so often, like if you have a giant surge or crash in hash rate, then all of a sudden it's a big disruption for a while. Like you either have like huge congestion issues or just blocks start spitting out all the time, and then by the time like the hash rate levels off, or then the hash rate could go something completely different by the time everything levels off. And so anyway, I don't know if you've looked into that kind of stuff, Pasta, but I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Not too much thought, but I have put a bit of thought into it. So yeah.
Interesting. Well, unfortunately, we got our the Odyssey chat is a little slow because I'm just now getting some reactions, like my Lightning Node comments and stuff, which is whatever. I'm sorry, but I think we're just about getting ready to wrap this thing up and go to the after party. What do you think, Pasta?
Yeah, I think it's about that time.
So if you enjoyed this thing, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Throw me. So the CoinTree super chats are obviously, you can leave CoinTree messages any day of the week, any time of day. And when I'm not doing a live show and they're directed to the live show, I just shout you out on Twitter and all my other networks and stuff and answer. Great way to ask questions if I'm overloaded with stuff. The same thing works with the Odysee hyper chats. You can, any comment you leave on any video, you can do it with a little bit of monies to it, and so that's a good way to reach me. Obviously, what was I gonna say? Oh yes, so in June I'm going to be traveling a little bit, so I'm getting a lot of work fixed ahead of time. But with that, the good part of that means I'm scheduling guests significantly in advance. I'm just getting all my scheduling done for these live shows and stuff, so that you don't have to worry about any stuff. So if you have questions for the upcoming guests, I won't just have like a day before kind of, or you have to be live. So hopefully we get some questions and stuff like that. And I believe 2 weeks from today. So first off, next week, next Friday on the Digital Cash Rundown, which is an hour before the Dash podcast, it's our good old friend Chuck Williams coming on. And I know he's not a Dash person necessarily, but you know, we worked for Dash for a while, so if you have any other questions or things like that, we will be going over like the crypto headlines and stuff as well. But start thinking about stuff you want to ask Chuck next week. And then 2 weeks, it's going to be Michael Lewis from the Dash Investment Foundation has agreed to come on. So if you have diff-related questions, think about that for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks from then, I don't remember exactly what we're having then, but then, so a month, 4 weeks / a month from next time. So like 6 weeks from now, I think Arden of Dash Marketing for the core team is going to be on. So anyway, those are just some of the guests ahead of time. There's a bunch of other people I have on. I'll let you know. So now it's time for this wonderful thing called the after party, which is where we just have a nice fun hangout like this, except possibly a much more casual environment. Not recorded, don't worry, not broadcast. As many people as you want. We just hang out. We do it every week. Well, some of us do it every week. Every 2 weeks for the Dash after the Dash podcast, we after party. So if you want to go in there, you first have to join the Dash Talk Discord. Let me just type it out in here. StayDashy.com. Let me hit up the Odysee thing. StayDashy.com. That gets you into the Dash Talk Discord. Then you just start asking around. Hey, where's this after party at? I don't know, an after party. Where's your after party? And then just like a speakeasy, I'll let you in. So that's where we're going now. Thanks so much, Sir Noodles, for sharing your valuable time with us. Very excited for the release. If you use Dash at all, other than just like have like the mobile wallet or whatever, if you like run a node or anything like that, or run infrastructure, upgrade now. Upgrade it. Version 17, breaking change, all that stuff. So anyway, thanks guys. I will see you next week, or possibly in 2 weeks, or possibly in the after party. So peace.